Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait for a quorum here. We have 5. We need 6. Show at 3 o'clock.
Item H7, which is Harold Kreutz, and that is a request for a small-scale plan amendment to change the future land use designation from community commercial to planned industrial. That item has been withdrawn, so if there's anybody here today for that, it will not be heard by this board. And then we have item 8H, which is the Cedar Lake Drive irrevocable land trust on US 1, and this is by Kim Rozenka as the applicant, and this was a request to go from RU 111 and TR2 and BU 1 with the BDP to all TR2. That item was not heard, or it was tabled by the Port St. John board to the February 10th meeting, so that will be coming to you on February 22nd. But you will have to open that item up because it was advertised to just to table it to your February 22nd. But since it did not come to you with any recommendations, the board will not be able to take any action other than tabling.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Just to clarify as well, I'm going to move H8 over above H1, so that way we can
Yes, sir.
get Ms. Rozenka.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chair, just to let you know, I did speak to Mr. Golden, and he will be coming down shortly. He's
Thank
on
you
his
very
way.
much.
Okay. Who? Did he not know the meeting started at 3?
He's an alternate. City staff. Or county staff, sorry.
So he's just coming to save the day?
He is.
Who didn't show up? Did Mark inform us he wasn't going to be able to make it?
Yeah.
Mark, Bruce.
Harry usually shows. He didn't show.
Does he work in the building?
He does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he'll be here. It's not even paper today. Maybe number 1 in sales.
You saw me in the paper?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Last time I was in the paper, it wasn't so good. No, I'm just kidding.
This is a good thing.
Yeah, probably. I don't really get the paper, so I'm not sure. I know I was probably the #1 guy in my office, or for the whole company in residential. Yeah, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. But I know I'm one of the top 3.
I said something along those lines. The picture was there and everything like that.
Yeah, so it's probably true. One of those.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, last year was crazy. It's crazy right now. I'm working on 3 deals right now. And my uncle died yesterday, and yeah, so it's just like today sucks enough.
Correct.
I go there, I'm like president, so I'm there weekly, but probably just don't remember it. To do all kinds of cool stuff. So everyone helped me. Very good number of kids old enough, but I got to take them to Christmas, so I got to almost see them. Hopefully like 10 years. Oh yeah? Are you doing it? How much is it? I'm pretty sure they're coming in. I'm sure it's nice. The Harbor Grill is like the nicest bar I've ever been to. The Harbor Grill is on the pool area, they updated it. And they're updating it. Inside or they have a bar outside. Thanks for saving us.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We do have a quorum, showing 309. Brian, if you please lead us for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, everybody. The Planning and Zoning Board is an advisory board which makes recommendations to the county commissioners, who will make the final decisions on these items. Item H7, which was discussed previously, was withdrawn by the applicant and will not be heard today. Items on today's agenda will be heard by the county commission on February 4th. When a motion ends in any kind of split vote, a roll call vote may be taken to ensure accuracy. As a reminder, each member who makes a motion or second needs to turn on their microphone so your voice is on the record. At this time, if any board member has had any ex parte communications regarding any application, please disclose so now. Do I have an approval for the planning and zoning minutes from November 9th, 2020?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Brian, second by Ben. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. If we can begin with H8 on the agenda, if you don't mind, sir.
Yes, sir. So this is a request for Cedar Lake Drive Irrevocable Land Trust and Highway 1 Commercial Trust. The applicant is Kim Rosanka. The request is to change the classification from RU 111 TR2 BU1 with the BDP to TR2 with a limiting BDP of 200 units. This item was tabled by the Port St. John Board, and we're asking you all to table it to the February 2nd meeting.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion to table item H8.
I got a motion by Ben and a second by Joe to table this item to February 22nd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. With that, we can begin with H1.
Yes, sir. So H1 and H2 are companion items, so for the benefit of discussion, I'll read both of those in the record, but I'll need you all to take action on them separately. H1 is Brevard Tower Communications, Inc. The request is to adopt the 2022.1 large-scale plan amendment for the future land use designation from Res 2 and neighborhood commercial to community commercial. H2 is Brevard Tower Communications, Inc. Bruce Moia, the applicant, requests to change the zoning classification from GU to BU2. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. I see the applicant is here today.
Good evening, Board, P&Z members. My name is Bruce Moia. I'm representing the applicant for this project. If you recall, we came before this board a few months ago to get request approval for you to transmit the request for the land use to the state. That was approved. That's been sent to the state, and we have responses back. And from what I understand, there's nothing that was objectionable to the state for this request. Since then, we've also had a meeting with the neighbors of the subdivision to the west. A very large development. I believe there's 700 something homes out there. I apologize on some of my facts. My computer, I guess, has COVID right now, so it's not responding, and that's why I have a little bit of lack of information. So I'm kind of remembering off the top of my head. But we did have a very long meeting, a very productive meeting. Mr. Gardner, who's in the audience as well, who's one of the owners or potential owners for this project, was also in attendance. It was a pretty long Q&A session where the neighbors had concerns, and we tried to answer those to the best of our ability. And as a result of that meeting, we've provided you with a draft binding development plan that we feel addresses their concerns, at least most of them anyway. So we're hoping that we can get approval today from you guys for this project to do the rezoning and the land use amendment. We feel it's a very good project. It's going to be very similar to the project that you see if you go west here on Wickham Road, close, by the wetland area out there. There's a boat and RV storage that these folks developed as well. It operates very cleanly. It's very successful. And it's in high demand in this area. They've had their studies done, and it's in high demand for this use in this area. So we're proposing to bring it there. We feel it's the best use for the property. It's probably the least impactful, the lowest intensity use you can have in any zoning, and as far as especially as traffic is concerned, because traffic is an issue out there. And I'm just sure you'll hear more about it later on after I get done. But there's only one way in that Norfolk Parkway when you go west of Minton. There's a very large development. There's a school. But I've got some information here that I would like to pass out, which is a comparison of what could be put there right now based on the existing land use and what we're proposing. So I'll pass that out so you can see that, we're about 5 times less the traffic than if we did a single-family residential development based on the unit count that we could have based on the land use of 2 units per acre. So a boat and RV storage is very rarely accessed. Normally, if people bring their boats there, they go there very early in the morning to take them fishing, and they're gone before most people are even awake. and they come back after people are already home. They used to come back later at night. So it's going to be a very nice facility. It's not just going to be a dirt parking lot where people put their boats there. It's going to have paved drives. It's going to have covered storage spaces, and it's going to be very well run, secure. It'll be lit appropriately for safety. It'll have rules in place so people don't take advantage and do things they're not supposed to do there. And then the conditions that we have in the BDP, we feel that it's definitely a good project, and we hope that we have your support. So I'm here for any questions, and I'll come back once I hear from the public.
Thanks. Is there any questions right now for the applicant?
So you guys have agreed to do a 50-foot buffer along the west and north boundaries. Is that it's a 6-foot wall? Is that what's facing the community?
Yes. So, yeah, we have very low-density residential to the north and very high-density residential to the west. And if you go out there, the site is very wooded along those borders, and we would rather keep that nice, natural, dense, very opaque, up to, 30, 40 feet of opaque buffer, keep that, maintain it, instead of ripping a lot of it out just to put a 6-foot wall, which really won't do anything because this site is on a hill. So if you put a 6-foot fence on the property boundary and you put the storage on the 10 foot above that on the hill, that 6-foot wall does nothing. So we would rather preserve the existing vegetative border.
Okay. Was there any other items that came from the meeting you had with the neighbors of the community that you felt like was a compromise?
Well, we put a cap on the number of units. We agreed that we would do any necessary traffic improvements to the road to make sure that it met any warranted improvements for safety, things like turn lanes, assuming it's all warranted and approved because it is a city road. It's a public road maintained by the city. So even though we're in the properties in the county, we'd have to get city permission to do any improvements, but we're willing to, we would do anything that would be warranted. And maybe even do some things that aren't warranted. I think the only thing that we had some discussion on that we really couldn't come to some kind of a consensus on was to prevent this property from contaminating the groundwater that would end up going to the lake that's on the border of the west property, which belongs to the homeowners association. And we felt that that's not an issue because we're going to have dry retention, so anything that goes on the ground will get trapped in the dry retention pond and will filter through the soil. We'll have a lot less vehicles on our property than the subdivision itself has in their subdivision that they use on a regular basis. And anything that happens there goes on the driveway or a roadway and goes right into the lake. Ours would have to travel through the ground, into the retention pond, and then through the soil again to possibly contaminate that. We don't think that would happen. Most of these vehicles don't even have fuel. I mean, like fifth wheels and travel trailers. So we think that that's a very low possibility. And the property will be secured. It'll be monitored through camera. So if anything like that happens, they address it right away.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No, I just would like to say one thing. Being a boat owner, I know that the best part about it is buying it. Most times it just sits there. So it probably will not be any more traffic than what it could have been. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Mr.
also am a boat owner, and I own 17 boats, from 20 foot up to 42 feet. Storage is an obligation down there because there's very few places to keep it. With 17 acres and 350 boats, you're only talking about a movement of 20 or 30 in the daylight or daytime. So it's not going to be a great impedance to Wickham Road or egress and ingress. Plus their lighting is limited to 17 feet. You got a 50-foot high barrier. It's not going to be an obligation or a sight problem with the neighbors. So I think you guys did your homework on this, and it looks like you answered most of the stuff that's in these many objections.
Thank you. And obviously on the lighting too, because that was something we talked about.
Yeah.
Maybe staff can elaborate, but there is a very strict code requirement that we cannot spill light outside of our property. So we'll be providing those photometric plans to staff, and they have a limit. I think it's .02 or .2. 0.2 at the property line, and it won't get there because we'll have that 50-foot buffer, so we think we'll be 0 at the property line, no problem.
Well, if there's no sewage dump permitted in that area, unless it was a sewer connection, you don't really have a problem other than rainwater.
Right, right. But we would like to reserve the ability to, if we do get sewer, because we're still in negotiations with the city of West Melbourne, they control the sewer there. They say they don't want to give us connection, but if that changes, we would like to have that pump out, or the dump station, but only if we have the sewer, not if we stay on septic.
I know during the last planning and zoning meeting, Ron brought up a good point about septic on the property, it being a previous landfill. You said there would be an above-ground septic system or something of that nature?
It would probably be a mounted system, mounted and
system.
pumped, but it would have to meet the Department of Health requirements, and it would be hardly used. It would just be like for the security guard. You know, it's not going to be something that's, you know, a public bathroom. It's going to be just for whoever happens to be on site at the moment.
Yes, sir. And the potable water as well?
It'll be a well.
Well?
Yeah, right now the city doesn't want to give us water or sewer.
Okay.
It looks like there's no gonna be any residing overnight or overnight stays?
No,
This is
sir.
on a contract basis.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question for staff related to this. Essentially, there's no comments from the state agencies, and my question is, did they know this was an illegal dump site when they made their evaluations?
So we sent it out to all of the state agencies, like, you know, the DEO, and then they transmit it to all of the agencies. With regards to the dump site, when we went to look at the DEP's website, they do have this site identified on their website. So, and they're one of the reviewing agencies, and there was no comments back from them on it. Now, they do have guidelines for developing properties that have landfills on them. So that may be something that you may want to consider if Bruce is willing to utilize those guidelines as part of developing this property. You may want to include in the binding development plan.
Mr. Chairman, Bruce, have you looked at those guidelines yet?
I have not.
Are they available, easily available on the website, you said?
Yes, sir.
Is that something that, Bruce, is that something you could do in a short time, or?
Yeah, I think we don't have a problem with that.
I mean, because I'm really concerned about the fact that it's an old dump site, especially with construction debris.
Absolutely.
Because we don't know what's in it.
Right.
You know,
We
don't
kind of
know if
have
it's
an idea.
pressure-treated wood that's got arsenic, or if it's asbestos shingles, or what it's got in
Mm-hmm.
it. So we really want to just simply not do any disturbance of that old dump site.
Right, and we're not proposing to. We've had some studies done on what's there. It'd probably be similar to development when they built the road over top of it. They didn't want to disturb it either. It's very costly. It's hard to do because you can't just build in rubble, so you have to build over it. So it's not our proposal to really unearth anything. We're going to build on top of it just the way it is. So just like they did the road.
And one other comment, you said you're going to leave a 50-foot buffer, natural vegetation buffer, that's already there, is that right?
Well, there's more to it, but in order to develop the property to make it viable, we would leave 50 feet on the west and 50 feet on the north where we butt residential zoning.
My point is that that's what's already there, right?
The vegetation is already there. It's
So
already
those are fairly tall trees.
very tall trees, yes.
Okay, good. I'd like to compliment you on that.
As a matter of fact, there's,
Thank
if
you.
you like, there's some pictures that show what that looks like. You might already have that. But that's, you can see in the aerial of the existing vegetation that's there.
Bruce, excuse me, do you have extra copies of the handouts you're giving to the boards for the
I think I
file?
gave them enough that there should be extras. If,
Any other questions or comments to the applicant?
No, sir.
All right, seeing that, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moya.
Thank you.
Seeing that, I'm bring it back to the audience. Anybody like to speak for or against this item? Please state your name and address for the record.
Donald Curry, 3461 Watergrass Street, West Melbourne. Until last weekend, I was a boat owner. And I have some fishing gear for sale if you're interested, sir. I'm actually up here to seek a clarification. Mr. Moya, is he a member of this board? And if so, how do you handle that if he's a member of the board and he's part of the applicants?
He is a member of this board, and we judge fairly what comes before us. Just because he's a member of the board doesn't mean we're going to show him favoritism or anything like that.
Okay, good. And regarding your concern regarding asbestos, my son's in the Air Force. He was exposed recently to over 40 parts per million. You know, 3's about the limit. And at the time, he was doing some excavating for the Air Force. And it was a landfill was there. And so it was the brake pads, mufflers, and other asbestos. So we're living with that. Anyway, appreciate it. Appreciate your response, sir, and the clarification.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others like to speak for or against this item? And just to clarify here, you're speaking on behalf of about 300 residents, so I'm going to give you 6 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm speaking on behalf of the 800 residents of Sawgrass Lakes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name's Steve Frampus. Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. I live at 3401 Watergrass Street in City of West Melbourne, County of Brevard. I'm one of the directors of Sawgrass Lakes Mass Association and the owner representative of over 800 property owners, soon to be 933 upon completion. Our Sawgrass Lake plat borders the Brevard Tower Communications property on 3 sides. I'm also a West Melbourne City Councilman. I understand that boards need to hear and review these requests without predetermination opinions, considering the facts presented by staff, the requestee, and the opposition. I represent a large part of the opposition to this zoning change. The developer will tell you that their research indicates this boat storage RV lot is needed and is a good fit for the surrounding communities. They will also say they met with the residents and made concessions based on those meetings. A second petition, because we submitted a first petition first time around, was taken to evaluate the community's post-meeting position, and once again, the rezoning is overwhelmingly opposed by residents with well over 500 names. The meeting was requested on short notice and held on December 26th, right before the holiday at Sawgrass Lakes Clubhouse. The overall resident opinion was that the developer was checking off a box to present to the county commissioners and this board. Any so-called concessions were preconceived and presented, not objectively discussed. They implemented an offensive strong-arm reasoning tactic of saying we could build this concrete block wall instead of this nice tree buffer. And I put that picture in your packet that I sent that you should have. We found that very offensive. Granted, this is in lieu of the hundreds of feet of tree buffer that is currently there and could be lost. We felt this meeting was a failure. The developer's environmental report by ACES dated 12/19/19 indicates no eagle's nest within 1 mile of the occasional presence of wading birds. This information is factually not true. There's an eagle's nest within a mile as the crow flies on our Sawgrass Lakes property. That picture is also in your thing. I took that picture yesterday, along with the daily occurrence of a wading bird and roosting sanctuary consisting of snowy egrets on the shoreline of the proposed zoning property, which if all those trees come down, that is going to go away, both of which could be affected by this proposed development. The developer would have you believe that only concrete and road construction waste have been buried on the site. However, the Universal Engineering Sciences Phase 1 Environmental Site Assessment Report dated 12/2004, Section 1.3 indicates during operational periods of the landfill, solid waste items such as paint cans, tires, automobile engine parts, and household trash were accepted by the site. This is on documentation with EPA. The developer's report from KSM Engineering and Testing indicates that the subsurface investigation was terminated after 3 to 5 feet in multiple locations because of debris, and states we recommend either debris be removed or adjacent site be utilized. Do we really want to disrupt 3 to 5 feet of this landfill property? As a recap of what county commissioners have already invested in this property, in 1992, the county closed the landfill at a cost of $400,000 tax dollars to meet EPA regulations and paid the current property owner, for the lost services, which is why we currently have this sanctuary type property. No thanks to the actual property owner. The property also provides a sound barrier to the traffic noise of Interstate 95, which would be lost with the removal of hundreds of feet of trees. The property was also denied support from the city of West Melbourne when asked to supply water and sewer, along with the possibility of annexation, which was prior to my tenure on the council. This proposal has become known as the Great Lighted Parking Lot on the Hill, as it is 30 to 40 feet above the surrounding residential area. When residents purchased their homes, some costing over $500,000, did so with the understanding that the zoning of this landfill area was extremely limited. A parking lot abutting our property was not one of those considerations. As stated by the board member at the zoning meeting for the transmittal of this property, there is already a traffic problem on Minton. The applicant is not using the available commercial property already in the area, and it is not a project that is recommended by the comprehensive plan. A large-scale comprehensive plan amendment requires a property of this size to be located on a principal artery and principal artery intersection. However, it is located at the top of a hill at a dead-end urban street with a blind driveway. Even though the transmittal report states there is no traffic data available, the Minton Road feasibility study rates the current intersection at Minton and Norfolk as an F during the morning traffic hours based on the level of service metrics of A to F. The developer has acknowledged that Norfolk Parkway is not the easiest road to get in and out of. We have nothing to gain and only to lose if this proposal goes through. Please take that into consideration. Thank you for listening to these contraindications for the zoning change, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
I also included pictures of the birds and all the other considerations we have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
question?
Yes, sir.
In one of the emails that one of your members sent, Perez? Yes, that's the one. In his email, he said that an inspector conducted a survey on the site. Did that inspector provide you with any kind of written report?
I think he was referring to some of the reports that was presented by the developer, by KSM, I believe, and they did an environmental study that I stated some of the facts in here that obviously wasn't brought out because it didn't favor the proposal. I brought it out.
Well, I was wondering if you had paid that engineer to do a study and he produced a report.
No, this was information we received from previous engineering studies.
Okay.
And the engineering studies that were already done by the developer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any others in the audience like to speak for or against this item? Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. Mr. Moya, if you could please approach.
Got a vaccine out back, so it's back working again. Yes, thank you. I guess I need to be a little diplomatic. It's always tough when you've got to talk about things when you have a city council member that's here saying these, and we do a lot of work in the city of West Melbourne, so I want to make sure I say this with all due respect. I think I got a look from the applicant when some of the statements were made that we didn't feel that, well, one, that we strong-armed anybody, or we thought the meeting was very productive. We thought we discussed every issue that was possible to discuss. I thought the meeting was very well attended by the residents. I think there was, I don't know how many there were there, but I'd say it was 30 at least. Yes, it was done around the holidays with short notice, and we did appreciate them having the meeting in that short time. But when the holidays come around, you guys don't change when your meetings are, and when people are out of town or on vacation or holiday and they're not available, we tried to pick a date that everybody was going to be available. So was it ideal? No, but I thought it was well attended, and I thought the discussion was pertinent and all the items were discussed. That it's not our intent to disturb that landfill. We would, if it was stay away from that property at all costs, there wouldn't be a development back there. There wouldn't be any homes back there because they would never have crossed the landfill to begin with. So there wouldn't be a road, there wouldn't be any residences, and there wouldn't be a school there. But they did. They built the road over the landfill, because that landfill was not just on our property, it extended into the right-of-way and to the south of the right-of-way. So it was built over. It has been built over, and anything that's there has been there for, I don't even know how many years. It's been there a long time. So we plan not to disturb it. We think that this development limits disturbing it more so than any other possible use. I mean, I think that this would be, we'd have a different story here is if we built houses on that piece of property, and 30 years later, they came to the county commission and say, hey, we've got issues with our children or something like that. I mean, if it was really that bad, I don't know that it has anything that would cause those concerns, but I think that would be a harder conversation to have if we put the existing use, if we put residential homes on landfill. So by putting a storage facility, I think that puts that to rest. I think I still feel it is the best use for this property. People will access this property off peak hours. That road does not have issues off peak hours. It has issues on peak hours, in the morning during rush hour and in the evening during rush hour, where the intersection fails because they look at intersection failure not at noon, not at 6, not at 4 in the morning. They look at it at the rush hour times between 6 and 8 and 5 and 7. So, which is when this will be rarely used. It would be a lot less used than if it was actually done with residential lots at 35 units. There'd be a lot more traffic added to that intersection if we did residential units that we could do without coming to this board. So I think that we've addressed all the issues. I think that we're going to disturb this property as little as possible. And we're going to make sure that we don't unearth anything that's going to cause us a problem, because why would we do that? That's not in our best interest. So we're going to try to preserve as much as we can, preserve all the existing trees to the greatest extent possible, and put in a low impact development. So I appreciate your patience with me, and I'll answer any other questions that you have.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Moia, if you're going to be holding all the water on the property or maintaining your own rainwater and stormwater, will you be digging a retention pond to hold that, or how will you be managing the stormwater?
Yeah, most likely not. I mean, we won't get anywhere near where the debris exists, because you can't dig in it. You can't even drill through it. So we're staying out of it. We're gonna work within the topsoil. We're gonna be filling on top of it, maybe scraping a little bit, but we're not gonna get into anything within any reasonable distance of that material that would cause an issue with the DEP or any other agency. or cause us to, get into a site condition where we can't, where it's going to cost us a lot of money to remove debris that's been sitting there for years. We don't want to get into that mess at all. We're staying out of it,
Staying above it.
staying above it, rising above, yeah.
And I believe that material is about 3 or 4 feet underneath the ground. It wouldn't
3
just-
to 5.
3 to 5, okay. So it's not just sitting above,
No,
near the top
no,
layer.
it's been, filled over.
Other comment I did have is that FWC did review this as well, and they had no objections, comments, or recommendations towards this project. Same with St. John's Water Management, and same with the Florida Department of Transportation. And you stated also Department of Environmental Protection, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Moya?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. This has been before us before, and we know the contentious battle here is the environmental aspect. You've brought up many times about how this is the least impact. This could be turned into a housing development, as you've noted. What other potential uses has anybody come before you or the seller to look at doing here that could be less impactful than what you're trying to do?
I think the only other use I know about is,
Make a point of order, please. The zoning doesn't allow for housing development.
Thank you.
based on the existing zoning, we could do single-family residential, or I think the only other use is like a private golf course and maybe one or two other very uses that it's not really a development, but that's basically about it under the current zoning.
And can staff clarify that this does have a Res 2?
So the land use is Res 2 and community commercial. It's split. The largest portion of the property is the Res 2. It's just the eastern piece along a little strip along the eastern property line is neighborhood commercial. The current zoning classification is GU, which is general use. And it allows 1 unit to 5 acres, right, George? 1 unit to 5 acres. So they would be allowed under the current zoning to have 3 homes on the property. They could change the zoning to be something that would be compatible with the Res 2 without going through a large-scale amendment and have up to 2 units on the acre.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine any builder building a house or any buyer who would be willing to buy a house on an old dump site. So saying that we can, comparing it to what residential impacts would be, I think is facetious. Don't go there. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, well, Ron, what are your thoughts on this property? What else do you expect the owner of this land to do with this property?
I don't know.
Just sit there forever, empty?
I don't see that as a bad thing. In reality, it's almost like having a park that's not used by anybody. It's environmentally, it's a nice place with a lot of trees, and the trees help us. In terms of what else you could do, I believe that Bruce has made some serious commitments to avoid potential problems. And if he's willing to go ahead and follow those EPA guidelines for building on top of a site, I think that would be very helpful. My concern is, how deep is that? He says it's 3 to 5 feet. Well, is it still? Or has the erosion over the years deteriorated that ground cover down to 18 inches or a foot? Unless you actually bore down all over the place, you're not going to know where it is. And even the act of boring down, to me, is risky, because if you run into concrete, you'll pretty well know it, and your drill's gonna stop. You run into some wood or some shingles, asphalt shingles, something like that, your drill's just gonna go right through them and bring that stuff right up in the air. So anything that we can do to say there will be no disturbance of that soil is an improvement. And that's one of the things I'm very concerned about. Is the septic tank already existing on this soil, on this property, or was
No,
that something?
Not that I know of, no.
Not, okay. So that would be, and if you put a mounded property, you wouldn't actually be disturbing the soil.
Correct.
That would be built on top of it. So that is an advantage. And then by taking that into account, plus the guidelines the Department of Protection has, and if we can put that in the BDP, if he's willing to do that, I think we have a potential use for this property. I am concerned about the fact that there's a traffic problem. And there's nothing he can do about it, but if I would say, if you could say, look, we're only going to be open in non-peak hours, and the peak hours we're not going to be open, you can't take your stuff in and out during that time, that would help alleviate that problem. However, from a business concern, I don't know that that's even possible.
I agree, and I don't think it's our position to regulate hours of operation.
Oh, yes, it is. If it's a conditional use permit, we can do that.
I think it's an overreach.
Well, with regards to traffic.
I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Good, Joe.
I still have a Harry over
You
here.
still going?
One second, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you building anything on top of the dump site?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, sir.
And you can get your compaction and you have no problem with that?
Correct.
And what is going on top of that dump site?
We'll have paved driveways and probably gravel or stabilized parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Joe.
79 years ago, I was born and raised in a residence that was on top of a garbage dump. That was 79 years ago. The community's still there today, and it's been well developed, and it's still a nice place to live. Next to it are 3 golf courses. There's a lot of things you can do with land, but in this particular case, it looks like you guys have chosen for its best utility and the least part of our problem. So I would suspect that after all the homework done by the staff, the state, and all the agencies, it's pretty well clear that this is the best utility for that piece of property.
Yes, sir. And I just wanted to add to that with the transportation. It shows here that the transportation, if it was to be a storage facility, it would only increase to 81.94% capacity. So the traffic increase would only be 1.29% from where it is right now.
Well, with regards to the traffic impact, one of the things Ron mentioned is he's concerned about that. And I think that one of the statistics the gentleman brought up was there's another 100 and some odd homes that are going to be built in that area. So they're already living there, but they're concerned about the traffic impact. But that's going to raise that traffic impact more than what this facility would.
Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
Do you believe the applicant would be okay with adding those regulations to the BDP?
Yes.
Okay.
I bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
Got it down there.
Sorry.
I am a firm believer in private property rights. And I don't think you take private property rights away from one person to benefit yourself. I don't see any reason why we should take this man's private property rights away from him.
When I look at this project, I think that this project is a perfect fit for that neighborhood. So I would make the motion to approve his site plan.
I'd second that motion.
I have a motion by Harry, a second by Joe.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
does that include a modification of the BDP to include the recommendations from the DEP?
Harry?
Have to add that.
Yes, sir.
No, I would not like to do that. I would like to keep my motion the same.
Okay. With that,
I second it.
I do have a second. All those in favor of the motion as is, without the recommendation from DEP?
Aye.
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 Nay.
You get a roll count? Roll.
Ron Barcher,
Nay.
Harry Carswell. I know you made the motion, but
Aye.
You got all the
For the
ayes.
record.
Pardon me?
She's doing a roll call for the record.
I didn't
Brian
hear.
Hodgers,
Aye.
Aye, yeah.
Ben Glover,
Nay.
Joe Buchanan,
Aye.
and Peter Filiberto.
Aye.
4-2.
That motion passes 4-2.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to clarify, I was just more in favor of the DEP regulations being added to the BDP. I was in favor of the item, just wanted to see that added.
Yes, sir. Going on to item number 2.
So that was actually, you took action on item 1?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So item 1 did not necessarily have the binding development plan associated with it, but that's okay. So we'll just carry that forward to this matter here. H2 is Brevard Towers. INC, Bruce Moia applicant requested change of zoning from GU to BU2. So I guess you're looking for a motion on that application.
And just to clarify,
And-
H2 does have the BDP in it, so if we
That
wanted
does
the
have the
DEP.
BDP.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion?
Yes.
I show Ben.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the item included with the BDP presented by the applicant, adding the DEP regulations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to H3.
H3 is Ag Adventures Chad Genoni. Applicant requests a binding development plan limiting the density to 4 units per acre for consistency with the Res 4 future land use designation and an RU17 zoning classification. I believe the applicant is here to speak to the matter. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them for you. Board.
Is the applicant before us today?
Good afternoon, board members. Chad Genoni with AG Ventures, and I actually have no comments at this point. I'm just here to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, sir. Any questions for the applicant here by the board? Seeing none, I bring it out to the audience. Anybody like to speak for or against this item? No members of the audience. Bring it back to the board regarding item H3.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is a change essentially to change the residential density from 4 units per acre to essentially 8 units per acre, almost more than that. Lots of 5,000 square feet, house size of 700 square feet. You're going to put this kind of stuff in an area that's for residential 4, which if you ask anybody on the street, what's a residential 4? That's 4 units per acre. That's quarter-acre lots. That's like 10,000 square feet. These are half that size.
Yes, sir.
That kind of development is extremely dense for a rural area.
I was expecting you to say something on this, sir, since it was in the MIMS area, sir.
This, we approved a development very similar to this at the south end of Mims, right next to Titusville. And I know that Mr. Genoni went to Titusville to try to get his property annexed into the city, and the city decided for other reasons to not annex it. And that really surprised me, because what he was trying to do with his development would have been a tremendous benefit to the city. Because they would have been able to get the tax revenue from this new development without paying for roads, without paying for fire protection, without paying water and sewer fees. You know, it was like, here, give me all this money. It's just coming. It's free. I don't have to do anything. And so anyway, he came to us and used essentially the same development plan. And now he's bringing that same development plan into the center of Mims, which I really strongly object to. I don't think it goes along with the Mims small area study that was passed several years ago. One of the things we were trying to do was to keep the density low, and as you go farther north, keep it lower. And as I said, these are 5,000 square foot lots, extremely small.
Yes, sir. I did notice that the schools here too, there would be a deficiency in schools for Pinewood, which would mean the elementary students who did move into this proposed community would have to go to Mims Elementary School instead. I didn't see much in regards to the transportation in the staff report. I don't know if staff has anything in regards to transportation or public safety for Brevard County Sheriff or Fire.
So with the, let me get to the concurrency section here in the report. I believe that there was no issues with concurrency from what I remember, and there was nothing from fire rescue or public safety related to the project. This was approved previously in 2014 with a limitation of 370 units. So the applicant is coming back today and asking for a limitation of 400 units.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So staff, as of now, this gentleman could build 370 units on the property as it sits.
There's a, I wouldn't say as of now, I think he needs to have the binding development plan for the 370 or 360 units. Well, I'm sorry, 370. 370. So there was a, with the application for the zoning is inconsistent with the land use, so he needs to have the cap of the, with the binding development plan to limit the density of the property to match, which I believe is what Mr. Barcher is indicating is what his concern is, because the density with the zoning, he can have a smaller lot, but yet he's maintaining the density of the land use and that. So it allows for like a cluster type development where you can have smaller lots and greater open space, but you're not just eating up that whole area in the lot size.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff or the applicant?
I understand that the partial and proposed subdivision will be serviced by Brevard County Sewer and Water. And the policy 1.2 addresses the residential density requirements for sewer and water.
The applicant has indicated that he will have sewer and water on the
Yes.
site. So once you get over 4 units to the acre, you're required to have sewer service.
Right. And it's provided, or
Yeah,
will be provided.
They will be provided.
And in the concurrency, I don't see anything with the school district or the traffic that's really impactful for the situation. Is that correct?
I think the school district has indicated that they were deferring it to another school.
Yeah, it was the elementary school. Pinewood would
Yeah.
reach capacity, and they would have to go to Mims Elementary School.
Yes, sir.
I also do see that this is close to the lagoon, so seeing it hooked up to water and sewer, I feel is an advantage for any community near the lagoon. Any other questions or comments for staff or the applicant?
So with this amount of units, it would automatic, or the county or city would hook up to the sewer, and there would not be septic tanks. But any less than this, there would be septic tanks for if there was any development here.
They're required to have, they're indicating they're going to have water and sewer as part of their application. So your action is taking that into consideration. If there was further down the road where he would come in and say that's not the case, once you get to 4 units to the acre, the sewer is a requirement.
Well, I visited this location myself, and there's plenty of open space around that for development. So it's not like it's clustered with 10 different subdivisions.
That's one of the only advantages I see, or I think it's a lot of units per acre, but I do like the fact that it will not be septic tanks. So it's kind of give and take.
Thoughts, Ron?
Well, in reality, I'm a little split because I do like the idea of cluster development, and that's exactly what he's doing here is cluster development. But my concern is that it's a rural area, and it's just those kind of developments just don't fit in a rural area. Although, we've already approved one in the south. This one will be approved. D.R. Horton has a bunch going on up along 95, which are very similar. Not quite as small, but almost. So, fighting a losing battle, but I'm going to fight.
Wait, would you recommend, and of course this is the applicant approves, changing the zoning in another matter?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
To change the zoning in another matter instead of having it as Res 4?
The Res 4 is fine. It's, it's the zoning that's, for me, that's the problem with the RU17.
RU17, okay.
5,000 square foot lot. It's about the size that you would want if you want to put a trailer on.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, the request is for a binding development plan limiting the units. The actual zoning classification on the property is not something that's been requested to be changed. So if you, in your discussions, I believe that what you would be looking at would be, does the binding development plan mitigate the proposal? And if you're concerned about the number of units, the lot size, those would be things that you could ask the applicant about.
Shall we have a discussion, a debate? Sir. Mr. Barch does have a point here where that this area is rural. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think your point clarifies something. So we got our zoning approved in 2014, and we had it's RU17, and apparently with that, you could do 6 units an acre. So when we came in, I was asked by staff to come in here and they asked me to file this request so that we limit to 4 units an acre. That's my understanding why we're here. We have RU17, and we're just simply here. My thought was more of a formality so that we'd be consistent, and that it was a request by staff. That, in other words, the zoning, we went through this whole thing, we worked it out with the community back in 2014, and essentially without the binding development plan, I guess we could have up to 6 units an acre with that zoning. So, that's my understanding why we're here today with this request.
I believe that you would not be allowed to have that zoning classification with the land use limit without a binding development plan, and that's where our records indicated it was a binding development plan of 370 with a cap of 370.
Yeah, see, that's not my recollection of the way it was. We took a certain, as a matter of fact, at the request, at the time that happened in 2014, we had an additional 20 acres that we were trying to rezone, and we took that off the table. That was my understanding of why the binding development plan was not required, is because we took that land off the table. So we got it rezoned. We have a resolution, and we were proceeding the whole time that we had RU17 zoning. I mean, nobody ever notified us. And we came in with the site plan, and we were told at that time, can you please, essentially, can you record this? That's been my understanding of this process. I mean, I was there in I'm sorry. Were you there in 2014 when this took place? Yeah, I was there.
So, I'm not trying to debate with you. I just wanted to ask George if that was, George, do you have that recollection of events?
Yeah, I had thought there was a commercial component as well as part of the applicant's request. And so there was a lot of information going back and forth. And I think it was lost to get a binding development plan recorded on this property to make that zoning consistent. Because this zoning, RU17, is consistent with residential 6 and higher future land use designations, it's not consistent with residential 4. So some zonings that would be consistent with residential 4 is the RU111 zoning. It's a 75-foot lot width and 7,500 square foot minimum lot area, which, could be an approvable classification. Or if you want to retain the RU17 as the applicant suggested, you can put in a minimum lot width requirement or a lot area requirement. The density just gets us to make it compatible with the density limits of that land use designation size. And you can find that in section 62-1255, exhibit A is the compatibility between the comp plan designation and the zoning classification. And so that's what we're trying to fix today, is we found out that we're missing that nexus, that binding development plan limitation, to make it consistent.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I was also around in that time, and at that time I was president of the MIMS community group, and we found out about this development, and so we were following it very closely. And one of the things about this development, there was some commercial land that was going to be taken, some land that was going to be taken out of residential, put into commercial. That was a part of the entire package. But as far as the 110 acres, that was going to be 370 houses. And that was, I am pretty certain that I remember somebody saying that we needed a binding development plan, but as is obvious, there was a lot of other discussion going on at the same time, and it simply got dropped through the crack. I don't know why, how.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant or staff? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I would make a motion that we recommend against this change. I just don't think that this development fits in a rural area. With houses and lots this small, it just doesn't fit.
Understood. With that, I'll need a second. No second.
Can we open up for discussion?
You get a second for discussion?
No.
No?
I just have a general question.
All right, question from Mr. Hodgers.
For staff, there are several lots on the southeast corner that our maps don't show us the size of those lots, but they appear to be rather small. Not that it's consistent in large scale for the whole area, but there are some of those small lots. Is there any way to know what the size of those lots are?
I would have to look that information up, but they do appear to be small. I don't know that we've captured their actual size in our staff report. Their zoning classification is the same of this property. It is the RU17, so I would say that they are compliant with that zoning class.
Thank you.
Yeah, most of those lots, with the exception of possibly one, are around 7,500 square feet. There is one that's around 6,000 or something like that. Most of those lots down in that area are 7,500.
So they're fairly close in
Yes.
comparison to what he's proposing.
Yes.
Just not 440 of them.
True.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Barcher's motion does still sit on the table, right?
There was no second, so that motion dissolved.
Right.
Okay. Well, I will make a motion. I just wanted to think about it a little bit more, Ron, to deny this item for a recommendation to the county commissioners.
I have a second motion to deny this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Ben and a second by Rob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Is it 4-2? 4-2. I show Joe and Brian Hodgers opposing. Thank you. Moving to H4.
This is Marker 24 Marina LLC. Peter Belak is the applicant. Request for a conditional use permit for alcoholic beverages, full liquor, on-site consumption in conjunction with a private club in a BU2 zoning classification. The applicant is here. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them for you, Commissioners.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Black, Market 24 Marina. Requesting this condition to add to the many improvements we've done to the marina to create an atmosphere that's kind of consistent with marinas, giving the tenants of the marina, along as well as the homeowners of Market 24 HOA, a place to gather and enjoy a drink on the river.
Yes, sir. That's always a private club.
Yes, sir.
Is there memberships?
You'd have to have a boat at the marina, or you'd have to be living in the community. There's 20 houses in the community, 104 boat slips.
Understood. Any questions for the applicant here? Questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. Is there going to be an outdoor deck?
No. That was when I met with county staff. We limit it to the existing footprint where that shows on your map there. Do you have the exhibit?
Yes, it wasn't clear
So
to me.
it does say deck and covered tiki bar. So yes, I guess there will be a deck.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And you're planning on closing at 10 o'clock, is that right?
Probably prior to 10 o'clock.
Okay. What about speakers, music, outdoor?
I noted there was a request from staff to limit the noise. I'd like to have some ambiance music, but we don't need to have loud music, no.
Is that something that you could keep the music inside the building and not really have speakers outside?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said that you're going to provide additional landscaping?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know what that's going to be yet?
Working with Susan Hall, landscape architect, currently to incorporate some silver buttonwood trees, which are natives, muley grass, more coconut palms, and a handful of mass trees.
Oh, good, good.
Thank you, sir. I did have a question regarding the parking spaces. I saw there was 24 parking spaces in total that you have, but with it being only the HOA members, and this shouldn't be a problem.
We do understand there's a parking situation there, so we did want to limit it to people who would already be at the marina.
Yes, sir.
Or in the surrounding community.
And I do see that this is also Within 400 feet, there's no churches or schools.
No, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Anybody from the audience would like to speak for or against this item? Name and address for the record, please.
John McDonald, 950 South Banana River Drive, second generation growing up on that street, on that road. I have no problem with opening a facility like that. My major concern is traffic. Need about a dozen more speed bumps and a lot more lights because it gets dark down there.
Yes, sir. I had the same concern. That's why I brought up about the private club, who's going to be a part of it.
Right.
And he was telling me he's the HOA member, so I imagine people will be walking there or people who are driving their boat up.
But that just adds more. Once, I don't know how many units they already have, but not every household has just one car. If you go down the road, you see 3 and 4 and 5 cars parked out in front of people's houses down there, and it's getting kind of insane on South Banana Road Drive.
Yes, sir.
And that's it.
Thank you. We will note that for code enforcement and for county sheriff as well.
Right, but the road is nuts. There's no sidewalks either. So people walk in the road, and if you have a facility where they're a little tipsy coming out, you might have problems. That's all.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Any other members of the audience like to speak for or against this item? Seeing none, I bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, I'd vote to approve this as requested.
I have a motion by Brian Hodgers,
I'd second it.
and I have a second by Joe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passed unanimously. Moving on to H5.
H5 is Tammy McCoy requests to change the zoning classification from AU to EU1. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Is the applicant here today? If you may, please.
Good afternoon.
Name and address for the record, please, if you don't mind,
Tammy
Tammy.
McCoy, 3673 Middleburg, apartment 102, Rockledge.
And what brings you before us? If you don't mind speaking into the microphone.
This property has been in the family for all of my life, up until my mom's passing in 2015. This particular lot is in my name, and it was changed over by my mother before her passing. The reason why there's a need is just to comply with current zoning. The family owned the property to the west and to the south of this area. There wasn't an issue because we all lived there. Now that she's passed and reverse mortgage, and to the west is still in our name, but this particular property, I just need to have it appropriate for someone else to own it.
Understood.
Yeah.
Any questions for the applicant here?
No.
Seeing none, I bring it out to members of the audience. Anybody like to speak for or against this item? All right, seeing none, I bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir,
I consider this request to be consistent and compatible with the surrounding area, and I move that we recommend approval for this zoning change.
I'd second it.
I have a motion by Ron and a second by Joe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing no, none opposed, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Moving to item H6.
H6 is Thomas and Rachel Darnell, applicant Kendall Moore requests a zoning change in classification from SEU to AU. I believe Mr. Moore is here. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them for the board.
Applicant, if you don't mind. Thank you, sir. Mr. Moore?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Kendall Moore, professional address 895 Barton Boulevard in Rockledge. Here today on behalf of Thomas and Rachel Darnell as it relates to the address 5685 Lake Washington Road in Melbourne. Just in simplistic terms, we're here today requesting a zoning change from SEU, suburban estate use residential, to agricultural residential. In very short and simple terms, my clients are intending to get more horses for personal use. They have a couple horses and goats now. Potentially, there was an option to get a conditional use under SEU, but that would only allow 6 total animals. And so our request for you today is asking that we would be able to go to agricultural residential. Generally speaking, you do have the staff analysis in front of you that lays out the fact that this current zoning proposal would be proper to consider under the future land use designation that exists. Clearly, the staff report does lay out the details, but just for the sake of the record, we do believe that this proposed land use does not propose any problems in terms of issues of hours of operation, lighting, odor, noise, or anything like that. It will retain its same primary purpose as a residential property, and secondarily with the ancillary use that many have in that same area, which is a pole barn or some form of small ancillary structure for the sake of some kind of agricultural use. Again, these horses will be for the sake of personal use only. This is not have any kind of business intent of any kind, not seeking to start any commercial operation of any kind. So therefore, no changes in traffic generation, concurrency, or other issues that may exist. And we believe it's consistent with the land development policies and the administrative policies that have been set forward, as well as the future land use elements and other elements that are considered and that you saw referenced in the staff report. We do believe that there has been some precedent. It's not been recent. Goes back to the late 80s where a neighboring property, I think roughly 1,200 feet away, was changed from SEU to AU for a similar purpose. And I think at that time, there was also a limitation or condition that there not be any kind of agricultural commercial use of that time. And so we would not have a problem stipulating to the same, because this is strictly intended for their ability to have additional horses for personal use. We are clear that the public notice to the neighboring residents has gone out. I think there's at least one person left in the audience tonight, but we are unaware that there's been any concern expressed by neighbors or others. And so we've not had any questions raised by others once the property was posted and there's public notice. And so we'd ask for your favorable consideration of this item tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and available for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for or comments for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sir.
Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir.
Is there a number of horses that they would like to have on the property in specific, or would they be willing to cap that number of horses?
They certainly would like to have the maximum number available to them. Obviously, at the prior 1987 item, that was roughly 12 acres, and they capped that out, I think, at 16 was that number. And so they would love to have as many as they possibly could. They are very much into horses, assuming that number may be somewhere in the 10 category or range if this board would see fit.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain to me what they would be needing 16 horses for?
Well, the 16 was the prior. I think that their request was for 10. And if you look at the way that the code is structured, they have a couple of goats as well. And so it says, I think the code listed as horses, mules, goats, and barns is what it states in the code. So ultimately, those goats would count against them as well toward that number. So it would be a collective number of total animals, relating to that scenario. And so our request would ultimately be 10 in that regard.
And you're thinking they'll probably have 4 or 5 goats, so maybe 5 or 6 horses?
We are very hesitant. We'd love to allow, if you allow 10 animals, to allow us to have up to 10 horses would be the preference. Their current animal mix today happens to be, goats and horses, but this request today is primarily related to horses, and very clear from their request that number could very likely exceed 6 if they are allowed and given this opportunity.
Let me try to rephrase it. What are they going to be doing with the horses?
It's strictly personal ownership and personal use. They are not in any way.
Do they have kids?
They do have kids and other family members. They are not in any way involved in any kind of commercial business of any way, shape, or form. Not, I don't know what it would be, breeding or any other commercial to do. And we were certainly asked during this process. I'm hesitant to limit all commercial uses because they do have other businesses, some of which may be located at that location, wholly unrelated to agriculture, horses, goats, or anything of that nature. So if we were to limit it, clearly we understand, looking back to 1987, that the issue in that case was the person was intending to run a business with the animals, and that is not the intent here. It is strictly for personal use. I think I'd answer, sir, that they strictly love horses. It's not anything any more complicated than that.
Okay. So would you be willing to have a BDP that stipulates there will be no packing, processing, sales of commodities raised on the premises?
If you limit that to agriculture, yes, and I'll tell you the one thing that they do own that raises some issue for me. They actually own a food truck, as an example, and so limiting the commercial components, anything that would be normally available to them today under that zoning category, would want them to be able to do that, but would not mind any restriction that is relating to agricultural, animal, or any related purposes, associated with that.
I'm concerned about if they have agricultural products that they're using and then selling at that place, then that creates a traffic situation.
Yeah.
And if what they're doing is raising stuff that they're going to be put in their food truck and then haul the food truck out someplace else, I don't see that.
Correct. And that's what we were seeking to protect. The horses, goats have nothing to do with any business operations that they have or that they plan. So if there were a restriction relating to a BDP specifically to those things, we would not have a problem in that regard. But just want to be careful that we're not impacting, any of their other businesses that they own or business operations.
I'm also concerned about the fact that they might decide to sell the property at some time in the future with this zoning, and without a BDP that restricts it, then there could be packing, processing, sales of commodities like that could create a problem that we could avoid if we could have that BDP in now.
Yeah, fully understand, and we would be more than happy to go the BDP route and to limit that. And again, just being clear with the board, our concern has nothing to do with any kind of agricultural relations whatsoever, just being careful with their other business entities, but would be happy to be bound by that condition. And it's something that we've discussed with the client, particularly considering what was before this board in 1987 was discussing that exact issue relating to the potential of a business associated with increasing the number of animals.
Yeah, I was less concerned about the total number of animals, but I was just thinking, if the total number of, if it's a total of 16 horses, what does one family need with 16 horses? What kind of activities are they doing?
Yeah, the 16 number, in all respect, came from the 1987 case. That property was a bit bigger than this one, I think 12 acres, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's why our request before you today was of the nature of 10 as opposed to the 16.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
That's including the goats.
It would be total animals. I think the code puts horses, mules, and goats all into the same category in that regard.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Does any of that business activity include like horse riding lessons or boarding horses or anything like that?
No, none of those business activities whatsoever related to the horses. They have a numerous amount of businesses, but the food truck was the one, since it could potentially come to that location. That's the only reason that we're being careful, but there are no horse-related businesses whatsoever. No riding, no boarding, nothing of that nature whatsoever. And I think probably in the wise providence of staff, whatever BDP language that we could work to and agree would certainly make sure that there are not any, horse-related business activities in that regard.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
I motion to accept it.
Oh, we have to go to the audience first, sir.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any members of the audience like to speak for or against this item? All right, seeing none, I'm bringing it back to the board.
I motion to accept it.
With the BDP or without?
With the BDP or without the BDP?
Without the BP.
Without the BDP?
Yeah.
Second.
I have a motion by Joe for approval of this item without the BDP, and a second by Ben. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Nay.
That motion failed.
I'll make a
Discussion.
motion to approve it with the BDP.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
What items in the BDP are we limiting it to?
Strictly anything related to the agriculture.
So it'd be a BDP of ag tourism?
If you want to call it ag tourism or
And-
packing, as Ron mentioned.
Okay, ag tourism, packing, glue. Sir?
I was just using the words that we had in our staff report.
Okay.
About packing, processing, sales of commodities. Because those are the typical things that an agricultural site will have that could be a problem. And that for when the rest of the community is all residential.
So right now,
If we could put those kind of words in, and if Mr. Moore would be, could
He
agree with
indicated
those
that he would
words.
approve it as a
yes, sir.
BDP.
I just wanted to confirm that with him first. Mr. Moore, would you be okay with that? No packing, no processing, no sales on the property, as well as no ag tourism?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's fine.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we have the motion as such. Motion by Brian. Do we have a second?
Second?
A second by Joe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passed unanimously. With that, I believe we're complete. Adjourn.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's a long day.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.